Hello and welcome to Stay Tuned. I hope you enjoyed our concert. Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here for this panel discussion. I'm so thrilled to have all of these people on stage with me. And we just wanted to share some stories and get some questions from you as well. But I would love to start with Lorena here from Arte Americas. And we are honoring Dias de los Muertos this week in Hispanic Heritage Month. And can you tell us a little bit about Arte Americas and the history with Dias de los Muertos there?
Of course. I just want to first thank you all. I feel like I am among amazing artists here, and I really appreciate the invitation of that Ray and the Frozen Philharmonic made to Arte Americas to collaborate in some way with this, the contribution mainly of Huichu's work. And just question, who has been to Arte Americas or knows Arte Americas? Oh, great, amazing. Okay, who has been to Arte Americas during Dia de Muertos or the festivities of Dia de Muertos? Okay, so I'm guessing I'm gonna see you all soon because it's coming, right? Dia de Muertos is very important for Arte Americas. We started in 1985, that was Centro Bellas Artes, and it was one of the first, I want to say, places that took Dia de los Muertos as an opportunity to invite artists and collaborate in a very innovative and contemporary artistic way with ofrendas. That is, taking something as traditional as an ofrenda del Dia de Muertos and making something new and something special, reinterpreted it in some ways. So before, in 1985, we didn't have a space, so we used to borrow the Fresno Metropolitan, one of their galleries, to exhibit the artwork. But as you know, we now have a very large space. It's the largest cultural center in the Central Valley, Latinx cultural center in the Central Valley, and we are actually opening this year's ofrendas next Thursday. So we have been very, very busy in Arte Americas, and I feel that with today, it feels like the beginning of this amazing tradition that we keep celebrating year after year.
Thank you so much. And Juan Pablo, we heard the story about your piece and the history, the legacy that you were sharing with us in your piece. Can you show us some images or tell us about these images that we're about to see?
Yeah, so we put together some images of like the narrative of the story. So this is Pátzcuaro. So this is where basically the story begins. You arrive there. Next slide. Okay, so these are basically you see musicians walking in the streets and playing, and a lot of these bandas are mobile, so they're walking around the plaza and then eventually at the cemetery as well. This is the Lake Janitzio. You can see even the nets are shaped like butterflies. So if you see them from above, everything is butterfly. That's the island of Janitzio. So it takes a while, like half an hour to get there, and it's very loud. The lanchas are very loud, and then you get musicians. You get like trios accompany you in these little boats that are serenading you. That's one of the churches. And then that's the cemetery. It gets jam-packed. Once you're there at night, there's a lot of people. But the colors are incredible, no? It's surreal to be there. It's been a while. I was there when I was younger, when I was a kid. I haven't been back since, but someone pointed out that I now need to take my son to continue the tradition.
Yes, and tell us about the inspiration behind the piece. When you first came to me and told me you had this inspiration to write this music, it was because of Oliver, right?
Yeah, my son had just been born, like 3 years ago, and I came and saw Ray shortly after, and I said, like, I've been thinking a lot about lineage and heritage and tradition, and thinking about Oliver, my son that was born here in the States, but both my wife and I are Mexican, so what's his lineage going to be? And I thought about Dia de los Muertos is about the dead, but it's also a celebration of life, no? So it's kind of the cycle of life, and I thought this was a perfect theme to. It was the first piece that I wrote since he was born, after like 10 months of feeling, parents here, how it is. The first thing I sat down to write was this piece, so I was very inspired and can hear that kind of novelty coming through.
Yes, and I would love to see and hear about you, Jorge, about your experiences with Day of the Dead.
It's one of the most fascinating traditions, I think. I would like to add that, I mean, people there to go to that day they cook for the dead, and they bring the food to the tumbas. I mean, how do you say, their graves, and they really cook the most delicious dishes because they know. And some kids, well, I mean, some families that go with the kids, they have to go and then eat it, so that the kids really think that it's like Santa Claus, I guess. But it's a very, the things I've seen in the little villages, it's very poignant, because you can see that the person is really there with them. It's like this moment that they really treasure. I mean, it sounds nice that they cook for them, but I mean, their mind and thoughts and love, it's there in quite a dramatic way, and it's very incredible. Of course, you go to the bakeries and you can have pan de muerto, the most delicious pan de muerto. We love it, and yes, it's one of these things in Mexico.
And you reside in Chicago, outside of Chicago. Do you go to the Mexican bakeries there?
Absolutely. First thing in the morning with my wife, we're there for the pan de muerto that we do. We love it, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And Huichu, I'd love to introduce you to our audiences and tell us a little bit about your experience with Dia de los Muertos and also the art that you created for this week.
Hablo español. Adelante la pregunta.
Bueno, Huichu, nada más Rey te pregunta si te puedes presentar con el público, presentarte a ti, el arte que estás exponiendo en este momento.
Muy bien. Mi nombre es Huichu Kuakari. Vengo de la cultura purépecha. Hipure Wandar. Purépecha quiere decir yo hablo purépecha en español. Para mí es algo muy especial este día, porque gracias a la invitación de la Orquesta Filarmónica, estar con grandes maestros de la música. Y la música con el arte se mezclan. De hecho, hace rato que estaban tocando ellos, en mi mente iba corriendo esa composición de lo que es el arte, imaginándome cómo se mezcló con el arte que yo traje para todos ustedes. Y eso creo que me motivó para hacer más arte de esta temática.
My name is Huichu Kuakari. I come from the Purépecha tradition in Michoacán, and I am very pleased, and I thank the Fresno Philharmonic for inviting me, and I'm very pleased to be surrounded with such amazing artists. I was listening to the music, and when I was listening to it, I just saw, I was able to travel and see the different connections that music has with art, and it was so inspiring that I created this series of works that you see today, specifically for this event. And I'm very, very happy to be here with you.
Can you ask him about the process of that wood? How does
Yes. Huichu, ¿puedes hablar del proceso? ¿Cómo se llama tu obra? ¿Cuál es el proceso y cómo lo creas y cómo se llama?
La obra que estoy presentando se llama Huaricua, ya de la muerte. La técnica que uso se llama pirograbado, es fuego. Uso diferentes herramientas, pero también uso stain para darle forma a stain de madera. Entonces es una técnica mixta que me da más oportunidad de que se noten los tonos más fuertes, porque es un poco difícil hacer la técnica con fuego. Y nuestra deidad máxima se llama Kurikweri, la deidad del fuego de nuestra cultura. Y por eso siempre los purépechas estamos como relacionados con el fuego, así como con la mariposa monarca.
His technique is a mixed technique, but it's basically the main ingredient or the main component is fire. It's called piro grabado. Piro, I believe in Latin, is fire, right? But he uses also other taints, is it, to saturate a little bit more the piece. And I just want to make sure that we all listen again to the Purépecha word for muerte. Huichu, ¿me puedes?
Guaricua.
Guaricua. That is the Purépecha word for muerte, which is also, you mentioned that throughout your work.
So when we first sat down, Lorena and I and Stephen, Wilson, and Ellen, we were trying to think of how we could collaborate together. And you were reading Juan Pablo's, narrative about this composition, and you were able to identify Huichu as a local artist from the Purépecha, area. And it was such an amazing, connection to make. And I just think that aside from that, the language is, you were telling me that is starting to fade away. Can you tell us a little bit about, again, going back to, history and stories that are, need to be told and shared. The language needs to be shared.
Absolutely, and I think Huichu is doing an amazing work, not only as an artist, but as a holder of culture and a holder of tradition and the language. He has written so many books trying to make sure that we do not forget those original languages from Mexico, in this case, Purépecha. And it was just fascinating how when you visit Arte Americas and we started talking about how can we collaborate, it just felt very, very in tune, right? We have this master artist here in Fresno who also is a native Purépecha speaker. And it just felt like it was very, very easy and organic to connect you and here for this occasion.
Yes, and I wanted to come back to you, Jorge, that, this Brahms, right, is a different language, anything than, from, I don't know, it just feels like it's a language in its own, interpreting Brahms and playing it and how difficult it can be. How is that for you personally in just continuing, this legendary kind of playing of this romantic repertoire?
Well, Brahms, since I was a little boy, he was really one of my first loves with music, and continues to grow my admiration for this man. So inspired, and he was struggling quite a bit because he had the shadow of Beethoven just before him. So even though I think that Brahms, from the very beginning, when he was a very young man, his zeal, his personality, his musical thoughts were so clear that it's quite amazing if we think that this concerto, it was quite a struggle for him to write this concerto. And it took him, I think, at least 4 or 5 years. But it's a young man who started at 21 and then played it at 25. This dramatic concerto, people were not really used to this type of music. The first performance was a complete fiasco. They thought, what is this? What is going on? It was really a terrible blow. But I guess he knew who he was, and he just continued to work. And then, little by little, it gained the admiration of so many people. And he was very admired while he was living, luckily. And it's if you talk to any pianist, or most pianists, this concerto is so special for us. I think it's so moving. Also, the way he wrote this second movement, which is one of the most poignant and beautiful and tender, loving, moments in music. And I'm thrilled that we did it here. And I have to say that one of the most thrilling moments for me was when you play pianissimo and when you have the whole and you hear real silence from the audience. That's I love the applause, of course we love the applause, but the silence while you're doing it and thinking, I mean, I like to think that you capture and you're really saying something very special for this moment. Because we played it last night, but it's a different experience. So that's why live music, there's nothing like it. Yes. And thank you for inviting me and for this particular concerto. I love many other concertos.
Well, we'd like to take a moment to open up the floor for any questions you might have for us.
That is a very good question. Yes. So the question is it unique, right? Is Dia de los Muertos unique, a unique celebration from Mexico? Huichu, si el Día de los Muertos es específicamente una celebración que se festeja en México.
Bueno, sí, el Día de los Muertos tiene su origen en la cultura prehispánica. Muchos dicen que la cultura prehispánica que es más antigua es la cultura purépecha. Y de ahí muchas otras culturas tomaron la celebración y se hizo en la época colonial, se hizo como general primero en lo que es el área de Mesoamérica y después en todo lo que es el territorio mexicano. No tengo idea si en otros países de Latinoamérica se celebra, pero parece que es solamente en lo que es México, territorio mexicano.
So, the tradition of Dia de los Muertos, it comes all the way back to pre-Columbian cultures, specifically starts with the Purépecha, but it also spreads through Mesoamerica. And later, when we were colonized, that Mexico was colonized, and it was also there was a breach, I want to say, and now I'm saying this myself. I'm not speaking for Huichu here. There were a lot of things that were taken from the Catholic religion, right? There are some elements that you will see that they do not belong with the pre-Hispanic traditions, right? You see crosses, for example. But there are many elements from the ofrenda. You see crosses, you see candles, but there are many elements from the ofrenda that come back all the way pre-Hispanic culture, such as las calaveras, the different varieties of pan de muertos. And as you go along through the different areas of Mexico, you see many of the elements from the region. So if you go to the coast, you might see a lot of elements from palm trees, right? Woven baskets on some elements that are the traditional practices from the area. Whereas if you go to more nowadays, you will see, if you go to the center of Mexico, you will see plantillos of cempasúchil, right? Which is the marigold plant flower, which it comes from the Nahuatl 20 petals. So there are very different interpretations. There are very different pan de muertos because Mexico is a pretty large region with many cultures within. But as well, Mesoamerica it was also expanded through Guatemala, and so I'm actually not sure if in Guatemala they celebrated Dia de Muertos. But definitely throughout the entire Mexican country, different versions of altares and different versions of celebrations for sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
From the musician,
who are your favorite composers and musicians? And what do you recommend listening to?
I have to tell this anecdote. This morning we had breakfast by chance. We were at the same hotel and we had breakfast. And I asked Jorge if he could play this encore. Manuel Ponce is a Mexican composer, and he was considered like the father of nationalism, like the first Mexican composer that had the idea of blending Mexican traditional music with classical music. And he has a huge catalog of piano music, guitar music, orchestral music, and he was my first kind of reference and inspiration. And Jorge has an album. Here's a plug. What's the name of the album? Música Mexicana, I think it's called. The most beautiful album of or a lot of Ponce's great jewels. And I was telling him as a kid, that was like the album that started me, and how important it is to have great performances of music that is in the catalog, because if you don't hear it well played and well registered, well recorded, you don't know it exists, or sometimes the music itself doesn't communicate a great performance like that. So I thanked him for that inspiration that, sparked the curiosity for me to pursue a similar path from that. So Manuel Ponce would be my recommendation. And piano concerto that Jorge also recorded, is, what's the name of the album?
Well, just recently I recorded 2 piano concertos by Mexican composers. Ricardo Castro, which was really the very first virtuoso from Mexico, and the Concierto Romántico by Manuel M. Ponce. Fabulous works, but I mean, seldom played, especially the Ricardo Castro. And you asked also to recommend. I would recommend to everybody, just be curious about anything. It's like that's what sometimes very young people, not that you're not young, but young people ask me, or the parents ask for a guidance. And I said, no, let them take them to any concert and then let the kids choose, because they know. I mean, you'll never know where you're going to get a spark from a kid, or what ideas that might, even from visual arts or from music or from anything. Just be open to it. But I still love Brahms, Beethoven, but I love 20th century also. I love Debussy, and I love Ponce as well. I'm discovering all the time.
I think I know what piece to ask you to come back and play now. Yes, and for me, it would, it's like, I have 2 kids. Which one is my favorite? I can't say what composer or what artist is my favorite. And I think, what you're saying, just to be curious, just, coming to concerts, going to the Arte Americas Museum, looking at, wonderful art, and just exploring everything around us is so important. Not to be so, I've got to learn classical music, I've got to understand that. I mean, classical composers have always been influenced by so many things. Nature, just to go, I was just, on Saturday morning, I had an opportunity to run up to Yosemite, and a member of the orchestra and I went just to the Mariposa Valley there and hiked. But nature, Brahms and Beethoven were so inspired by nature. So I think just being open and inviting and exploring, like you were saying, just to be curious is very important. But I'd be curious to know, Huichu, what artist really inspires him and you?
Huichu, quieren saber, están hablando de los artistas y los músicos que los inspiran. ¿A ti qué artista o qué músico te inspira? ¿Artista visual o músico?
¿Arte o música?
Art, el que quieras.
¿Arte? Yo admiro mucho el trabajo de Van Gogh.
¿El qué?
De Van Gogh. Van Gogh
Van
es
Gogh.
mi artista favorito porque creo que nos parecemos mucho en los sentimientos de la pasión. Sí, sería en música, pues la música clásica, los clásicos, Beethoven, sería por su historia y todo lo que las limitaciones que tenía él y cómo compuso las bellas sinfonías.
Increíble.
Sí.
So for Huichu, he's very inspired by Van Gogh, about the history and the passion in Van Gogh's art, and as well as in Beethoven with all this torment, right? His biography, and how he was with all of circumstances against him, he was able to create such wonderful pieces. On my end, I have to say that I feel the same way as Ray when it comes to visual arts. I'm very curious since of knowing how things were created and why. What was the reasoning behind Mexican muralism? What was happening in the time that made it so powerful, right? And what was happening in Frida's life and the circumstances that made her create and just be sitting be laying in bed and getting in touch with her artistic self. Or the contemporary works of art from Gabriel Orozco, which are very also Mexican artists, contemporary Mexican artists, who takes elements from the ordinary life, from nature, from accidents and things that happen without planning, and seeing poetry in the everyday life. I will say that having that open curiosity for the little, for the smallest, and the magnificent, right? Like Beethoven's Ninth, overpowering, but also like the sound of the bird that wakes you up in the morning, right?
Well, thank you all so much for stay tuned. We really want to thank everyone on this panel and for sharing your stories with us. Thank you for being here today.